You think bold foreign interventions ended in the 20th century. Think again. In a single night, the United States struck Venezuela, captured President Nicolás Maduro, and the White House said, quote, "We are going to run the country for now." This is not a story about one man. It is a story about oil, power, and a shift in global politics. Here is how we got here and what it means for you. Venezuela's geopolitics have long been shaped by one simple fact: oil. After Hugo Chavez rose in 1999, he reoriented Venezuela toward a populist, anti-US path, nationalizing the oil industry, allying with leftist governments, and courting partners like Russia, China, and Iran. Under Chavez and then Nicolás Maduro, Venezuela became a focal point for US, Latin America tension, sanctions, diplomatic isolations, and years of covert pressure alternated with periods of negotiation. The economy collapsed under mismanagement and sanctions. Millions immigrated. For the US, Venezuela was simultaneously a humanitarian concern and a strategic pocket of energy and influence. In the last 18 months, the rhetoric ratcheted up. US officials accused Maduro's government of narco-trafficking, economic plundering, and violating human rights. Sanctions intensified. Diplomatic channels frayed. Analysts warned the escalation was possible, but few predicted a direct military strike on sovereign South American soil. Then, in the early hours of January 3, US forces launched a precision operation in and around Caracas that culminated in Maduro's capture. According to US officials and multiple outlets, the operation combined air strikes and special operations team targeting military sites and presidential compounds. Maduro and his wife were taken into US custody and transported to New York to face indictments tied to narco-trafficking and related charges. President Trump publicly framed the action as necessary to remove a narco state and to stabilize the region, even saying the US would temporarily run Venezuela while a transition is organized. This move has multiple motives layered together. First, energy, security, and oil reserves. Venezuelan crude, though degraded and underproduced because of sanctions and mismanagement, remains one of the world's largest reserves. Controlling or stabilizing those reserves shifts leverage in global energy markets. Several outlets report explicit statements that the US intends to run Venezuela temporarily and tap its oil assets. Second, the counter-narcotics and law enforcement narrative. The US Justice Department has long accused Maduro and associates of narco-trafficking. Bringing him to trial fits a law and order justification. Third, geopolitical reset. Venezuela had become a foothold for US rivals, especially Russia and Iran. Removing Maduro reduces their influence in the Western Hemisphere and signals to allies and adversaries Washington's willingness to act unilaterally. Fourth, domestic politics. A bold foreign policy feat can be framed politically at home as decisive leadership. Whether that calculus drove the intervention is debated, but it's part of the mosaic. The world's reaction is explosive and polarized. NATO and some Western capitals expressed cautious support for removing a regime accused of repression, while many European leaders called for adherence to international law and a political solution. Russia, China, and several Latin American governments condemned the strike as a breach of sovereignty and a dangerous precedent. The UN Security Council convened an emergency session to address the crisis. This split reaction underscores a longer trend. Great power competition is now directly colliding with hemispheric politics. Expect immediate and medium-term consequences. Oil markets will jitter. Even the possibility of US control over Venezuelan production changes supply forecast. That can lower prices if US production ramps up into export streams, or spike if conflict expands and supplies are disrupted. Analysts are watching for who will actually run PDVSA operations and how sanctions will be unwound. Global alignments may shift. Russia and China may escalate their military and economic responses elsewhere, from increased naval deployments to accelerated support for allied regimes that could harden a multipolar standoff. There is also the precedent for interventions. If a major democracy conducts a direct regime change operation without broad multilateral backing, other states could feel justified to act similarly. The international legal order may face erosion. Commentators already call this a dangerous precedent. Regionally, Latin American markets and neighboring countries will face migration surges, security vacuums, and refugee flows if instability continues. For Venezuelans, the immediate impact is chaotic. Years of economic collapse, hyperinflation, and migration won't be healed by a single operation. Short-term outcomes could include security crackdowns and curfews as the US or a provisional authority secures assets and institutions. Humanitarian access could either improve if aid corridors are opened, or worsen if conflict fragments governance. Long-term reconstruction requires huge capital, investment, and institutional reform, and crucially legitimacy. Many Venezuelans who suffered under Maduro may welcome change, but sovereignty, national pride, and anti-imperialist sentiment run deep. Imposed solutions risk fueling resistance. Nicolás Maduro's arc is stark. A union bus driver turned foreign minister-style politician who inherited Chávez's Bolivarian project, then presided over economic collapse, allegations of graft, and international isolation. For years, the US and regional opponents called him illegitimate. Now he sits in US custody facing criminal charges. A dramatic fall for a man who governed for more than a decade. Whether his arrest leads to a transparent trial that documents corruption or becomes a symbolic trophy for US policy will shape the narrative for generations. From a US strategic view, the operation can be framed as serving multiple national interests. Removing a regime accused of criminal enterprise, regaining leverage over significant oil reserves, and sending a message to rivals that the Western Hemisphere remains within US strategic concerns. Domestically, it can be marketed as decisive action against narco-trafficking and kleptocracy. But there are costs: international condemnation, legal questions about unilateral use of force, and the possibility of a protracted insurgency or proxy confrontation. Three plausible pathways now lie ahead. A managed transition where a provisional authority stabilizes institutions, invites international monitors, restores exports under commercial management, and organizes credible elections with reconstruction aid flowing conditionally. A prolonged period of instability where fragmentation among military factions, guerrilla resistance, and competing foreign backers produces years of low-grade conflict and irregular migration. Or a broader great power confrontation, where Russia or China escalate materially, and Venezuela becomes a proxy hotspot, expanding tensions beyond the hemisphere. Which path unfolds will depend on rapid political decisions, international cooperation, and whether Venezuelans perceive any external authority as legitimate. This is one of the 21st century's most consequential sudden foreign policy events. Not just for Venezuela, but for the rules that govern state behavior, energy markets, and the balance between great powers. For Venezuelans, it is a moment of peril and possibility. For the world, a test of whether international law and multilateral diplomacy can recover ground. Watch closely. The next 2 weeks will tell us whether this becomes a corrective to a failed regime or a dangerous new norm in global politics. If you want more deep dives on geopolitics and business case studies, subscribe to the channel and don't forget to visit manishgoswami.com.